So now I'm going to talk about the secondary etude for the 2010 OMEA Percussion Auditions for All-State. This is page 4, number 2, again out of the Anthony Cerrone Portraits in Rhythm for snare drum. Many of you know this book. It's the red book. It's the scary red book with all the hard etudes in it. But just like anything, if you'll spend some time subdividing all the difficult rhythms and difficult time signatures, if you break anything down, really nothing is too difficult to perform. You just have to be patient with it and spend the time studying the score. So number 2 here on page 4, not as difficult technically as the primary etude, but it has several challenges that I want to talk about here. First of all, the 3/8 time that goes by kind of quickly at 144, it's kind of easy to get lost in some of the 16th note rests or the 16th rests. You want to make sure that you write those in. Practice either tapping your foot or listening with a metronome, playing with a metronome for sure, so that you don't play either too many notes or too few notes before you get to the next bar. That's a little bit of a pitfall early on in this etude. You also have a lot of drags or roughs or whatever you'd like to call them. 3-stroke drags, 3-stroke roughs, two grace notes and then 1 primary note. And those we know can be played 2 different ways. We can play those in an open style, which would be a rudimental style. Or we can play those with more of a crushed style. And in this case, again, this is orchestral music. These are orchestral etudes. Traditionally, it's customary to play those, when playing in the orchestral style, to play them in more of a buzzed roll, a buzzed sound, so a crushed kind of sound. And again, one's not really wrong or right, but traditionally most people are going to be used to hearing these in a crushed sound, particularly the judges that will be listening to the auditions. So you want to keep that in mind. Probably play the drags in a crushed style or a buzz style. Looking at about line 6, roughly in the middle of the page, you'll find these little bitty rolls. It almost looks like a marching diddle kind of notation. You have all the 16th notes, and then you have slashes on a few of the notes, which might look like something like this. But that's actually not what it is. If you'll notice the TR above those slashes, that doesn't stand for trill, that stands for tremolo, which in this case means to roll. If you see tremolo or TR in percussion music, especially in orchestral percussion music, or if it's a little bit older, that means to roll. So if there's a TR above a snare drum note, sometimes there'll be a squiggly line after that. That means to play a roll, usually a buzz roll. If there's a TR above a timpani note, that means to play a roll. So it can be confusing sometimes if you're used to seeing all the slashes all the time and thinking that's the only way that a roll is notated. It can be confusing, but just remember that also TR means to roll as well. So those are going to be very short little rolls there. You can play those as short little 5-stroke rolls with a buzzed execution. So I'm playing little 5-stroke rolls, which would be like this if I played them open. Without the diddles, it would sound like this. Then I'm buzzing those, or crushing them. So those 3 measures would sound like this at a louder volume. Okay, and then of course they're a piano. So we want to hear the beginning and the end of the roll as well. Make sure you can hear the release of the roll. And then after that, a couple bars after that, in the next line, about line 7, you have these 8th notes with 2 slashes and a dot above the note. So what that means is they need to be short. Short rolls and detached rolls. There are a couple of ways you could do those. The way that works for me is sort of playing a flam with 2 equal notes. and then just crushing both of those notes and lifting. The lift is kind of the key component there. So that little passage would sound something like this. Okay, here's that again. Okay, that's kind of how that works. And if you work on it that way, it should be consistent for you every time. And the last couple of things I wanted to mention here, first of all, there are a couple of sticking issues that are tricky, particularly as you get towards the end of the etude. Looking at the last 3 lines or so, you'll find that these drags start coming in with all the 16th note rests, and then with flams kind of quickly after that. And you can do what you like with that, just sort of make it consistent, write it in and practice it the same way every time. So looking at the 3rd line from the end, for me, I like keeping that right hand consistent, and it doesn't seem like it gets fast enough that it's a problem for me. That keeps all the grace notes on my left hand. You can alternate that as well if you like, either way. But one that's a little bit tricky, 2nd line from the end, 2nd measure, coming out of the 16th note with the 30 seconds after that. Immediately following in the 3rd bar, you have to play a drag right after a series of 30-second notes. That's a little bit tricky, but you just want to make sure that you have one hand free to get to the grace notes. So what I do, I'll play my drag, then I'll start those 30-second notes. Again, this is 2nd line from the end, 2nd measure. I'll start the 30-second notes on the left hand so that I can start the drag on the left, and then play the primary note on the right. So that line would sound like this. Here it is again. Okay. And a little slower. That works for me, and if you'll do something like that, if you tend to lean more to the left side, you could sort of reverse that whole thing and it would work that way as well. And then lastly, be careful not to rush 16th notes. As you start this etude, it's very simple. When you get into the 16th notes and the 32nd notes for sure, be careful not to get too excited and let it rush and start kind of rolling downhill, because it can get out of control pretty quickly. So make sure you're working with the metronome. As always, practice subdividing, and make sure that nothing rushes. So here's the whole etude. This is page 4, number 2 out of Anthony Cerrone's Portraits in Rhythm.